How do ketone bodies help fight viral infections? Find out here today on Jimmy Rants. Click on that little box down there in the corner. It'll take you straight to IGTV for today's episode. JimmyRants.com is the website, and as always, you can engage live in the content. You got to go follow me over on Instagram. I am at Living Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. Once you're there, engage live. We come here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, right here on Instagram. We also simulcast over here on my Facebook page, so thank you guys for being here today as well. And finally, over on my YouTube channel, thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. If you missed the live, we do put it up on IGTV, so you can watch it on demand. Goes up right after the show is over, so be sure to check it out if you can't make it at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. We also throw it up about an hour or two after it is over. It goes up on YouTube as a replay as well. And then finally, we have the official website for this show, JimmyRants.com, and there you can see all the past episodes. And if you like what I do here, we definitely have a way for you to support me. I have a Patreon link there, so if you click on the Patreon link, it takes you to the page and you can donate any amount. It would be greatly appreciated. And just a reminder, we are ramping up the benefits for those of you that do provide support. Over the weekend, we aired both of the upcoming videos for my podcasts airing Wednesday and Thursday this week. Well, since Friday, you've been able to have early access to those videos so you could watch those. I'm also, once I build up a little more of an audience on Patreon, I will do exclusive content just for my Patreon followers, where I do exclusive Jimmy Rants episodes there. So that'll be another perk. And then I'll let you guys also give your input as to what you want to see here on the main show. So you're my insider club if you go follow me and support me on Patreon. And I really appreciate all of your support. Okay, you guys, today I have a great topic for you because we're hearing a lot of people out there in the low carb, keto, and carnivore world saying that, well, since we know that COVID-19 and the people that are getting the worst effects of it are because they have poor metabolic health, thus you need to be improving your metabolic health, and the things that help to lower blood sugar and lower blood insulin levels and inflammation levels and is a low carb, ketogenic, carnivore type of diet. They've been using that as the excuse of this is why you need to get your diet right. And of course, in theory, I suppose all of those things are not necessarily bad, but nobody is asking the question of what ketone bodies themselves are doing in this process. And I was wondering there for a little bit if there was anybody that was going to actually investigate the role of ketone bodies on the immune system and how it helps to fight viral infections like COVID-19. Well, it just so happens we now have one such study, and this was published, you guys, in a medical journal called Med, M-E-D, and the title of the paper, Investigating Ketone Bodies as Immuno-Metabolic Countermeasures Against Respiratory Viral Infections. Brianna Stubbs is the main author. She's got a bunch of other people that are on this. I was looking at their declaration of interest. It looks like a few of them are shareholders in a beta-hydroxybutyrate therapy company developing products that are related to ketone bodies, inventors of patents related to ketone bodies. Another one of the investigators is on the Scientific Advisory Board for Virta Health, which is a ketogenic research wing, and the Scientific Advisory Board for various other companies. I don't recognize any of them, but all in the health space. So that's their declaration of conflicting interests. So they obviously have an interest in ketosis, and they actually understand that ketones provide benefit. That's why they're involved in those companies, and that's why they're researching this. And you guys that just joined us, you just came in late, I'm looking at the actual role that ketone bodies in the immune system fighting off viral infections, things like COVID-19, because we're hearing a lot in this space talk about, oh, go keto, go carnivore, and that'll help you with coronavirus. And it's like, okay, that's a simplistic way of looking at it, but what role does specifically beta hydroxybutyrate, which is the main ketone body in the blood, what role is it playing in boosting that immune system? This is powerful stuff I had to share with you guys here today on Jimmy Rant. So let's get into the paper. I don't want to get too much in the weeds on the background, because the actual information of what ketone bodies do, beta hydroxybutyrate specifically in the body, is the gold mine of this paper. So let's get started. Respiratory viral infections remain a scourge, with seasonal flu infecting millions, killing many thousands annually. Viral pandemics such as COVID-19 recurring about every decade. Age, cardiovascular disease, diabetes are risk factors for severe disease and death from a viral infection. Immuno-Metabolic therapies for these populations hold promise to reduce the risk of death and disability. Such interventions have great effects that might not only target the virus itself, but also enhance supportive care to help reduce cardiopulmonary complications, improve cognitive resilience, and then facilitate in functional recovery. Ketone bodies are endogenous metabolites that maintain cellular energy, but also feature a drug-like signaling activity that affects your immune activity, metabolism, and your epigenetics. Here we provide an overview of ketone body biology relevant to respiratory viral infections, focusing specifically on influenza A and severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS-CoV-2, which is COVID-19, and discuss the opportunities, risks, and research gaps in the study of exogenous ketone bodies as novel immunometabolic interventions in these diseases. So they go through and they talk about in the background how respiratory viral infections have been a public health threat for many years, going back to H1N1 and MERS and SARS and all the things. It's ended up costing in excess of $87 billion a year dealing with influenza. And they go through some of those statistics. I'm not going to bore you with some of that. We kind of know most of that. Metabolic therapies represent a novel strategy that could be used to target viral disease progression. Over the last decade, the field of immunometabolism research has uncovered multiple points where metabolism influences host pathogen interactions, not only in altering infection risk and viral replication, but also affecting the number of specific immune cell types, thus profoundly controlling the disease outcome. One metabolic therapy with promise in this area is being in a state of nutritional ketosis, where blood ketone body concentrations are elevated. Ketone bodies are endogenous molecules synthesized from the free fatty acids. The primary ketone in the body is beta hydroxybutyrate, BHB. It directly acts as both a highly efficient oxidative fuel and a signaling metabolite. BHB has been shown to have diverse molecular effects, including metabolic regulation, increased cellular resistance to oxidative stress, inhibition of this thing called nuclear factor KB, NFKB, signaling via HCAR2 receptor binding. Don't let the jargon bog you down. It just means it's doing good things in the body. Decreased activity of components of the innate immune system, such as a non-obese diabetic, leucine-rich repeat, pyridine containing protein 3, NLRP3, inflammasome, decreased systematic inflammatory burden, modifying gene expression, and a fuel in the context of energetic stress. In other words, it makes your body run more efficiently by lowering inflammation and by making things work the way they're supposed to work. Ketone bodies do that, and specifically in your immune system. A recently registered clinical trial proposed using ketogenic nutrition in intubated COVID-19 patients. These multifaceted metabolites are not panaceas, but their activity at the interface of aging, metabolism, and inflammation may be useful in mitigating aspects of respiratory viral infection, particularly among patients most susceptible to severe disease. So in other words, don't hear me wrong here. Ketosis is not the cure for COVID-19. I don't think anybody's saying that, and if you ever hear anybody say that, call them out, because it's not. But what it does do is it puts your body in a good position to deal with the things that happen when the COVID-19 virus hits your body. What happens? You get this cytokine of inflammasomes that just take off as soon as they go in your body. Well, if you already are in a state of nutritional ketosis, you're providing therapeutic levels of ketones in your blood, and you're able to lower your inflammation because of that and some of the other metabolic markers, blood sugar, insulin, and many others. And then this thing hits, well, guess what? Your immune system's like, well, we have been waiting on you. And then it goes and takes care of it. And this is the thing that's missing in all of this right now is we're all waiting for a vaccine. We're told to wait for the vaccine. We're told to do all these things, wash our hands, socially distance, wear a mask. But at the end of the day, we all need to be telling people, hey, get into a state of ketosis. Because when this thing hits, you want your metabolism to be working in tip-top shape. And if it is, you have a fighting chance of fighting this off, no matter who you are, no matter what you weigh, no matter how old you are. This is the take-home that we're trying to communicate to people because you're not getting it from the leaders out there right now. Blood ketone levels are normally only elevated when you're fasting or when you're following a ketogenic diet. Between 0.5 and 8 millimoles per liter. It is important to distinguish between this physiologic level of ketosis versus ketoacidosis. I've hammered that so many times, I'm not going to belabor the point. So some of the barriers to the implementation of this include difficulty with adherence. They say people can't do it, and all of us here, we do it all the time, so I don't know why it's hard. Potential complications in disease states, especially when there might be higher risk of a dysregulated ketoacidosis. And that is something that if you're a type 1 diabetic, you do need to be aware that you don't want to have super duper dippity high levels of ketones because they still are dependent on insulin to control their blood sugar. Things can get out of whack where you have very high levels of blood sugar, very high levels of ketones, and that's ketoacidosis for type 1 diabetic. Everybody else is pretty safe. Undereating, prolonged fasting can be harmful when applied to the ICU. Infection, including COVID-19, may cause metabolic derangement that leads to development of ketoacidosis. So that's another thing, again, in the context of a type 1 diabetic to be worried about. So exogenous sources of ketones can directly raise circulating ketone levels equivalent to those physiologic levels within minutes in a controlled manner without potentially burdensome dietary or pharmacologic interventions, as ketones are normal endogenous metabolites. Bioidentical exogenous ketones have a strong safety profile and a low risk of toxicity. They are classified as generally recognized as safe by the FDA. Although none have yet undergone formal testing as part of an investigational drug program. Well, they're not a drug, so that's part of the issue, unless they're trying to get them classified as a drug. But here's the thing, like if somebody gets admitted to the hospital with COVID-19, is there a downside to injecting them with some exogenous ketones as a preemptive measure of trying to fight some of the inflammation? I haven't heard of all the ways to deal with COVID-19. I haven't heard anybody talk about exogenous ketones. And of course, the question becomes, okay, what level of blood sugar do they have in their body? And if they have higher levels of blood sugar, does exogenous ketones do anything? Those are the questions some of the researchers and medical professionals need to vet out. But what if, and we're going to learn about them here in a minute, what if all the benefits you get from having beta-hydroxybutyrate in your blood, which is the ketone body in the blood, what if that could give you a fighting chance when you're trying to deal with the complications from COVID-19 if you happen to be one of those people? They don't know yet. All right, so they talk about the ketone salts and the advantages of using that. Let's get right to the good stuff. because they hypothesized that consuming exogenous ketones may improve specific clinical outcomes of all viral infections, including COVID-19, through many already understood molecular mechanisms. Older patients and patients with diabetes and whom these mechanisms are most relevant may be the people that need to be targeted with exogenous ketone body exposure. In the following sections, they outline the rationale and highlight the mechanisms through which Bhb alters cellular biology. This gets a little bit deep, guys, so stick with me, but this is really important. If you know somebody in your life who happens to get COVID-19 and start having symptoms, encourage them that if they're not already in a state of nutritional ketosis to get into ketosis and or take exogenous ketones, because all of these things I'm about to tell you about happen in spades, and it gives you a fighting chance to fight this thing off. All right, so let's look at those molecular mechanisms and cellular biology. Bhb, again, beta hydroxybutyrate, the ketone body in the blood, protects against oxidative stress. And I told you about this before. Oxidative stress, think of it as kind of a rusting. So when you have an old bicycle and you leave it outside and it gets wet and under the elements and everything, after a few years, it gets really bad rusted, right? Maybe some of the spokes start to get rusted, the tires start to dry rot, all of that. That's the equivalent of oxidative stress in the body. And oxidative stress tends to happen for a lot of reasons, but they're saying beta hydroxybutyrate protects against it. Oxidative stress from a variety of sources can contribute to lung epithelial damage during infection with an influenza. Cytoplasmic, fancy schmancy word, NADPH, plays a dual role in the body's defense against oxidative stress. In immune cells, NADPH serves as a cofactor for this thing called NADPH oxidase-dependent reactive oxygen species, which plays a crucial role in protecting the immune system, but can also damage as part of the pathological immune hyperactivation. In other words, it's improving your immune system. In these cells, it's also critical for the reductive biosynthesis, activation-associated membrane expansion, and the production of lipid mediators like the prostaglandins. However, in the cytoplasm of non-immune cells, this reduces oxidized redox couples to sustain a protective antioxidant response. This is illustrated by data showing that maintenance of epithelial cell glutathione concentrations reduce viral replication following influenza infection. So it's saying that it's not going to allow that virus to get in your body and continue to replicate and make things worse. It cuts it off right away. Although influenza-mediated decrease in NADPH oxidase activity in immune cells leads to increased susceptibility to further bacterial infection. So again, it's not a great panacea, but it gives you that fighting chance at the very moment when this thing could go south on you really fast. In cells with the capacity to oxidize beta hydroxybutyrate, ketone metabolism can also result in an increase of cytoplasmic NADPH through citrate. Thus, in settings where glucose metabolism is unable to sufficiently maintain the cytoplasmic NADPH pool, beta hydroxybutyrate metabolism could provide an alternative route to reduce this and protect against cell damage. And we see this a lot with ketones. They step in and take the place of where glucose would be. And of course, it's seen as a bad thing when glucose goes down in that context. So, oh my gosh, you're not feeding your brain well, for example. Your brain needs 130 grams of carbs so that you don't go crazy and your brain has to function. And what they're not referring to and acknowledging is ketones step in the place of where that glucose is. And in your immune system, same thing. They step in the place of where the glucose would be used, and they not only step in the place of, they make it better. This is exciting stuff. Notably, the enzyme beta hydroxybutyrate dehydrogenase, which catalyzes the initial step in the oxidation of Bhb, is not expressed in the monocytes And so an elevated Bhb would not be expected to affect this and have a stimulatory effect on either protection or pathological reactive oxygen species production in these cells. Again, little fancy schmancy, sorry for all the jargon, but I'm trying to get to the point of it's doing good things in your body so that you are protected if and when a viral infection like COVID-19 hits. A second mechanism whereby exogenous ketones could mitigate oxidative stress is through the upregulation of antioxidant genes. Bhb activates the transcription factor NRF2 to induce antioxidant response element gene expression and induces local histone acylation at the promoter of oxidative stress resistance genes. I know your head's spinning and I'm sorry about this, but I want you to hear the science, because if you know the science, and even if you don't understand everything I'm saying, you're going to understand, oh, this is why it's not just the kinds of food that I'm eating, it's not just the macros, it's not just the lowering of the blood sugar and the insulin, it's actually the ketone bodies themselves. I want you to see what's happening here, and I got a nice little graph. It shows you all the things that's happening. I know you can't see that real clearly there, but it's showing you everything happening all at the same time that's helping to fight the viral infection. So again, if you joined us late, look up this. This is in a medical journal called Med, published this year, investigating ketone bodies as immuno-metabolic countermeasures against respiratory viral infections by Stubbs et al. You should be able to Google that and find it online. Okay, let's keep going. So the recently published SARS-CoV-2 interactome indicates that the virus may also interact with HDAC2, although the importance of this is unknown at this time. In addition to Bhb-induced upregulation of antioxidant defenses, ketone bodies may have a direct protective antioxidant effect, and they do. Let me tell you, this is a big thing. We talk about anti-inflammatory effect of beta-hydroxybutyrate, but the antioxidant effect is pretty darn good as well. So antioxidant, you get rid of the reactive oxygen species, oxidative stress goes down, and that's good for your body. Pretty cool, huh? Both Bhb and acetoacetate, which is another ketone body, can act as scavengers for diverse free radicals, both in vitro and in vivo models. It should be noted that some evidence suggests that under certain physiological conditions, such as hyperglycemia, which is high blood sugar, acetoacetate, but not beta-hydroxybutyrate, is associated with an increase in oxidative stress, emphasizing that controlling glucose along with boosting your ketone levels may be important for an optimal effect. And therein was my issue. If someone's used to eating a carb-based diet and their blood sugar tends to be higher, and then you inject them with an exogenous source of ketones to try to help them, are you actually helping? So that's the question. And they're saying here, you kind of need to have lower glucose when you're having those elevations in the ketones. Although the multiple possible protective effect of ketone bodies on oxidative stress provide a compelling case for further examination as it relates to viral infections and systemic inflammation. So that's the first one. There's so many mechanisms by which Bhb can help in viral infections such as COVID-19, and this first one is protective against oxidative stress. The next one is Bhb directly inhibits the pro-inflammatory NLRP3 activation. So again, I know it's fancy schmancy language. Maybe some of you that aren't geeks in all of this, you're just going, okay, Jimmy, please translate because I'm not understanding everything. I'm trying, guys. I'm going to try to, as I'm reading the fancy schmancy language, tell you what it means so that you can apply it and understand it. Inflammasomes are essential components of innate immunity that sense pathogen or damage-associated molecular patterns. They are highly regulated multimeric protein complexes that facilitate caspase-1 activation for the secretion of interleukin-1 and IL-18. Again, fancy schmancy words, stick with me. Although some degree of inflammasome activation is required for the protective immune response, and in the clearance of certain infections, excessive pathological activation can lead to tissue damage and a systemic level of inflammation. As described in more detail below, both SARS-CoV and influenza are directly sensed by this NLRP3 inflammasome. It is expressed primarily in the innate immune cells. It is the best characterized inflammasome, in part due to its strong linkage to a metabolic inflammation, which manifests as obesity and type 2 diabetes, as well as driving age-related inflammation. So as you get older, you tend to have natural inflammation that goes higher. Which, by the way, that's why when you get older, you get more inflammation. It's why older people tend to have higher levels of cholesterol, because cholesterol increases in response to having higher inflammation to help deal with that inflammation so it doesn't disease your body. As obesity, diabetes, and age are also risk factors for all these respiratory viral infections, including COVID-19, these data strongly implicate inflammasome and specifically NLRP3 activation in the pathology. So scientists can definitely look at this. This is very, very important that we continue to look at these kinds of mechanisms. Early clinical data from COVID-19 patients suggests a role for systemic inflammatory activation in the pathogenesis of severe disease, with higher levels of C-reactive protein, which you've heard me talk about before, is that key inflammation marker in the body. Pretty easy for any doctor to run it. Ideally, you want it under 3.0, but optimally you want it under 1.0 for the lowest level of healthy inflammation. Some of this may be driven some of this increase in your hsCRP may be driven by an excessive NLRP3 activation. They did a study of 47 patients with a confirmed COVID-19 positive in Wuhan, found that increased lactate dehydrogenase most significantly correlated with disease severity. It's released from cells undergoing an inflammatory form of cell death known as pyroptosis. Some of the words even trip me up, guys. Which is induced by capsase-1 activation. Systemic inflammasome-mediated inflammation can also instigate emergency granulopiosis, which would explain, man, they used some like $1 million words in this study. Very, very good scientist, Brianna Stubbs. You're killing me on Jimmy Rants today. Let's put it this way. Is bad. This NLRP3 activation is causing all sorts of increases in inflammation in the body that's not good. So, let's move forward in it just a little bit so we don't get too much stuck in the weeds. The possibility that although inflammasome complexes contribute to COVID-19 morbidity has not been ruled out. It was recently reported that bats, the natural host of the virus, and asymptomatically carry coronavirus, has reduced NLRP3 inflammasome activation in response to MERS. Bat species show reduced transcriptional activation in response to inflammatory stimuli and reduced inflammasome activation, and express an abundant splice variant with an exon 7 deletion that further reduced activation. These adaptations appear to all arise from positive selection. All right, so this could explain why some people get COVID-19 and they're asymptomatic. Just like the bats, maybe it's because they have a reduction and a reduced level of NLRP3 transcriptional activation. Like, scientists have been trying to rack their brains. Why do some people get this thing and have nothing happen? Well, I wonder if they have a reduced NLRP3. Be something worth looking at. They've got plenty of patients to look at and run that on to see. Importantly, in multiple in vitro and animal studies that have utilized both dietary ketosis as well as exogenous ketone treatment, Bhb inhibits NLRP3 activation and reduces systemic inflammation in a rat model of gout, which is driven by NLRP3 activation. So, You want to lower NLRP3, they say get into ketosis. Okay. So a recent study of healthy young men given intravenous Bhb and LPS found Bhb was associated with a small increase in circulating IL-1, found in a small increase in inflammatory markers from healthy subjects given oral Bhb compared with a calorie-free control. A follow-up study by the same group showed no additional effect on Bhb on inflammatory markers, which suggests a context dependency of Bhb NLRP3 on circulating glucose and insulin concentrations. This is further underscored by a recent study demonstrating changes in insulin and glucose concentrations modulate the effect of Bhb on NLRP3 on human monocytes from diabetic patients in vitro, reinforcing the complexity of this interaction, which remains to be fully defined. So in other words, ketones alone will not necessarily overcome if you have a tricky metabolic system going on. So if you already have type 2 diabetes, maybe you have a propensity for higher levels of ketones, maybe you have slightly higher insulin, maybe the ketone bodies can't quite do this NLRP3 reduction that ketones alone in a relatively insulin sensitive person would. So it's really interesting. I don't think it provides no benefit, but the benefit is definitely reduced in those people. Given the strong preclinical evidence for Bhb-mediated NLRP3 inhibition and the role of NLRP3 in both protective sensing of viral infection and the progression to pathological hyperinflammation, it is vital to establish whether and how exogenous Bhb may alter the NLRP3 activity in the context of a viral infection like COVID-19 across a physiologically relevant range of Bhb, glucose, and insulin concentration. So they're trying to figure out what level of beta-hydroxybutyrate, which is the ketone body, what level of glucose, and what level of insulin should there be optimally across all the boards to give the maximal benefit in fighting these viral infections. They're still vetting that out. They don't know yet. What this would do would result in Bhb dosing guidelines that account for the timing of the disease progression, background metabolic state, and a specific circulating level of Bhb. So check this out. You're in ketosis. You get COVID-19. You go to the hospital and they check your blood sugar, your insulin, and your blood ketone level. Okay? And they see that your blood sugar is 94. They see your insulin level is 9. And they see that your blood ketones are 0.6. And they'll determine, okay, what level of Bhb supplementation do we need to give in this context? There'll be like some kind of a dosing chart that would say, okay, when they're here and here, then you give them this much because they already have this much beta-hydroxy. You see what I'm saying? This is getting down to like nitty-gritty science here. And I would love it if they can get down and actually come up with a prescriptiveness to all of this. How cool would that be? And not just for COVID-19, not just for these viral infections, but I would say anything that happens medically. How cool would it be if they looked at those things? I don't know about you, but I don't think they run any of those things. They might run blood sugar if you have something related to blood sugar while you're in the hospital, but man, they're not running, they don't care about some of those other things. All right, next one. Bhb has additional anti-inflammatory effects mediated by these things called HCAR2 and NF-κB. NF-κB is a potent pro-inflammatory transcription factor induced by numerous signaling pathways, including the cell surface receptor HCAR2, as well as oxidative stress. There's that oxidative stress again. These are all upregulated in people with diabetes, and it's strongly activated in the midst of a viral infection. So when you get higher inflammation levels in the midst of something like COVID-19 or the common flu, it's because of this right here. Upon activation, NF-κB translocates into the nucleus to induce expression of tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNF-A, IL-6, and IL-1, with multiple downstream effects, including inflammasome activation, apoptosis, and importantly, further stimulation of this NF-κB activation, which creates an inflammatory positive feedback loop. In other words, it keeps the inflammation rolling. That inflammation just does not stop once the ball gets rolling on this. So despite clear evidence that this plays an important protective role in the immune response to influenza infection and that impaired production of downstream cytokines such as IL-6 can influence influenza-related mortality, other studies have shown that this system can be hijacked to promote influenza replication, resulting in debate over its disease progression. So inhibition of this NF-κB has been suggested to be a possible treatment for people at the influenza infection stage. Although the role of NF-κB in COVID-19 has yet to be fully elucidated, the high level of TNF-A and IL-6 in patients with the most severe symptoms of COVID-19 are strongly suggestive of its activation. So in other words, good things in understanding the pathway by which the disease progresses lets you attack that pathway with therapies, which again, they're looking at beta-hydroxybutyrate as one of those therapies. Because Bhb strongly inhibits NF-κB mediated inflammation, what it does, it binds to the HCAR2 on central nervous system resident macrophages. Chronic administration of various exogenous ketone bodies fed ad libitum, which means as much as they can handle, in rodents, metabolizes fatty acid substrates, and it lowers NF-κB related circulating cytokines, IL-1 beta and IL-6. The effect of beta-hydroxybutyrate on HCAR2 and NF-κB in lung resident macrophages has not yet been tested, although if an effect does occur, in vivo infection studies should consider the timing of Bhb administration in order to avoid any interference with the protective effects of NF-κB, which could worsen overall disease outcomes. So this is another area where anti-inflammatory effects from this pathway with the NF-κB, it's so important, and beta-hydroxybutyrate helps. All right. Next one. Bhb reduces apoptosis via mitochondrial permeability transition pore MPTP closure. And again, I apologize because I know this is probably more sciencey than I've ever been on Jimmy Rants, but the science is where the understanding happens. If you understand the mechanism by which the science of ketone bodies helping with this, or at least try to understand somewhat at a very basic level what's going on, then you can see it's more than just the food. It's more than just the inflammation lowering generically from ketosis, the blood sugar lowering, the blood insulin lowering. It's actual pathways that are happening specifically because of the ketone body. So that's why I'm taking the time to do all the ABC 1, 2, 3 jargon for you. All right, prolonged opening of the MPTP is one of the one of the mechanisms through which reactive oxygen species can induce cellular injury and promote disease. Opening of this destroys the mitochondrial proton gradient that drives ATP production, which is your energy, and allows entry of cations, specifically calcium and magnesium, into the negatively charged inner mitochondrial membrane space, both of which severely impair mitochondrial function. Many viruses directly take advantage of this pathway to trigger apoptosis. For example, influenza PB1F2 protein acts via the MPTP opening to sensitize cells to this stimuli. Closure of it was suggested as a druggable target in a recent preprint of looking at interactions with COVID-19. Oxidation of beta-hydroxybutyrate closes this, providing cellular protection by maintaining all the electrochemical potential gradient requirement for ATP generation through oxidative phosphorylation, thereby providing the energy required to restore everything into homeostasis again. One of the key questions that must be addressed is whether physiological concentrations of Bhb protect against virally triggered apoptosis via an MPTP dependent mechanism. In other words, they haven't fully vetted this one out, but it is supposed, based on previous research, that it reduces this apoptosis, and it talks about that MPTP pathway. So if nothing else, this coronavirus is getting researchers to take a closer look at ketosis. And to me, if they can find mechanisms that work in boosting immunity and fighting off infections, I think it's going to apply to a lot of other areas of disease management. So this could be indirectly a very good thing, what happened this year. All right, next one. Bhb interacts with RNA binding ribonucleoprotein HNRNPA1. Several viruses are known to interact with host cells and a family of these RNPs that regulate mRNA stability, splicing, and translation. The ones that are specifically related to COVID-19 all interact in vitro, although influenza interacts with the related HNRNPA-A2B1. Again, I know that's really hard to follow when you hear somebody reading it, but stay with me. The preprint interactome of SARS-CoV-2 reveals only weak interactions that do not meet the strong stringency criteria. They are thought to assist, though, in the viral replication. Overexpression of this accelerates the genome replication and the knockdown ability replication. The Bhb interaction enhances stabilization of this, leading to a reduced senescence in mouse vascular endothelial cells. So the implications of this in the replication of viruses like COVID-19 are currently not known, but could imply enhancement of viral replication. You know what I love about this paper? We may not have sound, solid science that proves it absolutely, but here we have scientists that have been looking at the role of ketones metabolically at a very deeply scientific level. If nothing else you've learned, they know there's science here today. Because I'm even struggling, and I've written many books about ketosis, and they're kind of pushing my boundaries of knowledge and understanding. But they're identifying areas that have probably needed to be uncovered long before COVID-19. COVID-19 is the thing that got them to think about this. But look at this. They're thinking about it. They're putting it out there. They're saying, okay, scientists, you want to know what needs to be looked at. These are the things that need to be looked at. And if we don't dig deeply into these areas, there's no way we're ever going to make headway with any disease, much less viral infections. Next one. Bhb inhibits glycolysis. Viruses can induce changes to host cell metabolism or use host-derived metabolites to facilitate their replication. Metabolic plasticity is key to a successful antiviral immune response. Upregulation of glycolytic programming is essential for activation and effector function of many immune cell types, but transition back to oxidative metabolism is required for establishment of long-lived memory CD8 T cells. Induction of non-immune cells by relatively common pathogens like influenza, rhinoviruses, and human respiratory viruses all can infect the replication of cells. Complete inhibition of glycolysis by 2-oxyD-glucose, 2-DG, effectively defends against infection by several viruses, which suppresses influenza replication. Although the primary mechanism for this is believed to be the creation of energetic stress, secondary proactive benefits or protective benefits include the activation of unfolded protein response to prevent the assembly of viral proteins and the modulation of viral release through glycylation. So they recently did some work demonstrating that non-toxic concentrations of D2G prevented COVID-19 replication and is under accelerated development for use in a clinical trial of COVID-19. So how does beta-hydroxybutyrate play in all this? It directly inhibits glycolysis in multiple tissues, including the heart, the brain, skeletal muscles, and in tumors. This occurs via an increase in cytoplasmic citrate, which decreases the activity of phosphofructokinase, as well as a direct inhibitory effect on pyruvate dehydrogenase that is mediated by an increase in ketone-derived acetylcoenzyme A, CoA. Inhibition of glycolysis by ketones may not create the same energetic stress as 2-DG and the analogs, and may not have the same effects. The current gap is to demonstrate that the inhibition of glycolysis specifically reduces viral replication, and that this can be driven by exogenous application of beta-hydroxybutyrate to the infected epithelial cells. It would be important to expand this testing to ensure that glycolysis required for immune cell function was not suppressed by the Bhb. So the point is, this glycolysis, which is another part of the pathway of your metabolism affecting your blood sugar and other things, when you keep it reduced, you lower your risk for infection. That's important to remember as well, which is why you hear and have this move right now around the world. We need to be paying attention to reducing sugar in our diet so that we can lower this level of glycolysis that's happening. Okay, I don't want to get too much deeper because we're running out of time, but this is fascinating. Like, we know from all this information, this is what's established in the literature right now. We know all of these things about beta-hydroxybutyrate, and there's a lot more in here. Please go read the paper if you have time. Again, it's in the journal called MED, M-E-D. It was published in 2020. The title of the paper, Investigating Ketone Bodies as Immuno-Metabolic Countermeasures Against Respiratory Viral Infections, by Brianna Stubbs et al. I'll tell you how you can find it. Type in Stubbs, S-T-U-B-B-S, in a Google search. Stubbs ketone viral, and you'll find it. It comes right up. I did want to hit one other part of this, or a couple other parts of this. It preserves cardiac function, beta-hydroxybutyrate does. And we've known this for a little while too. Ketones are readily oxidized as a fuel for the heart, particularly under conditions of energetic stress such as heart failure. Data for both humans with heart failure and mouse models identify a metabolic switch that favors ketone body metabolism, which is adaptive. Genetic deletion of the enzymes required to metabolize Bhb accelerates dysfunction and pathologic remodeling. So that's important to remember. All those people that say ketosis is dangerous for heart health, it's actually one of the most healthy things you can do. Bhb also improves systemic glycemic control, and it mitigates insulin resistance. And we knew that as well. Administration of acute endogenous ketone administration improves metrics of insulin sensitivity in both people who are healthy and obese. Furthermore, both of these administrations of exogenous ketone will lower your glucose, mitigate hypoglycemic injury, and improve disease outcomes. Bhb-mediated lowering of blood glucose may also have the further benefit of facilitating optimal ketone body action on the inflammation. In other words, you get the glucose down, ketones can get to the level where they need to be in order to provide all these effects I've talked about here today, which pushes down the oxidative stress and the inflammation, which can't help but happen when you have high glucose. But if you can lower the glucose levels, that's the key here. Together, these data suggest that exogenous ketone bodies might actually attenuate glycemic dysregulation and its associated adverse outcomes in patients at high mortality risk from a viral infection. And I'll quickly go over the rest of them. I won't have time to go too deeply, but Bhb also alters your gut microbiome, which impacts your inflammation levels. Ketone bodies also attenuate muscle catabolism and functional decline, which means ketones have a muscle preserving effect. And so any kind of positiveness that comes from having that when you get sick with a viral infection, for example, ketones are helping to keep that muscle there. And so at the end, they talk about, this is a cause for pause. It's important to reemphasize that the characteristics of ketone metabolism and biological effects in the specific context of viral infection are largely not yet known. Most work has been undertaken in model systems, do not always translate to humans. Furthermore, based on the existing data, some effects of the exogenous ketones could be considered either ineffective or detrimental in the context of someone with a severe illness. As we've highlighted throughout the review, some effects could be harmful if they interfere with an early immune response. In other words, don't let the body not do what it's supposed to do by adding in something at the very time the body could be fighting it off. So really good stuff. Outstanding research questions. This is the last thing, and then we'll come to you guys. Despite a robust body of supporting basic science data underpinning these mechanisms of ketone bodies, potentially relevant to respiratory viral illness, there is a clear need to directly demonstrate the role in viral infection. A coordinated approach could simultaneously pursue clinical and preclinical studies in order to rapidly appraise the value of using exogenous ketones during viral infections such as COVID-19. We provide to the community a detailed outline of proposed investigations. Write down this website, you guys. impactmetabolism.org. impactmetabolism.org. And it includes key mechanistic questions to be resolved in both animal and in vitro models, and guidance on designing clinical studies using exogenous ketones targeting respiratory viruses and other chronic diseases. So pretty amazing research, you guys. I was so happy to find this one. And I know it was extremely sciencey today. So for those of you that aren't minded in the science realm like that, I apologize. I should have warned you in advance. I was going to be a little bit the Peanuts teacher, but I think it's all important for us to understand mechanisms. You may not understand the full pathway or like what some of those fancy schmancy words, scientific words mean, but just know that is so important. If we're going to be discussing ketosis in the realm of any kind of disease, viral infections or otherwise, you kind of need to know, at least have heard some of these things in the context of the scientific literature, and then listen to people that can translate those things for you so you can better understand. But we need to know that, okay, if you're going to have risk for a viral infection, even just the seasonal flu or COVID-19, that ketones do play a specific role that go well beyond the blood sugar lowering effects, the insulin lowering effects, and even the inflammation lowering effects, even though they show you mechanistically in this paper some of the reasons why inflammation goes down. It's not just this thing that magically happens. It happens very specifically with that increase in ketones. All right, let's see what you guys have to say. Going to come over here first to my Instagram crowd, then over to Facebook, finally over to YouTube. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. And I'm going to see how many people stuck with me and have some questions or comments. A Life I Love says, my husband, a Marine, was just tested for COVID as well as the flu with feelings of exhaustion, just not feeling well overall. He got his results today, COVID negative, flu positive. That was so strange to me. Yeah, that is strange. I know that a lot of the people who have gotten the flu, they just go ahead and call it COVID without the test. Since your husband's in the military, I suppose they want to be a little more formal about that. But I wonder how many people had what your husband has, just the common flu, and they're identifying it as a COVID. I don't know. The flu and COVID-19 are two different viruses. That's right, Piggy Pundit. Thank you for that. Rachel says, very good info. I'll have to run over it again, but I do know that since starting keto, I rarely get sick anymore. Yeah, me neither. And especially in the midst of COVID-19, since all this went down and we went on lockdown, I've been going high dose vitamin D and getting outside, getting fresh air every day and getting sunshine. I've tried to de-stress. I take a multivitamin, the fish oil. I try to do all the things to boost immunity naturally. And now we have good reason that being in ketosis is another one of those positive things that you can do if you want to put yourself in the best position to fight off viral infections. All right, let's come over to Facebook. What's up, Facebook? See what you guys have to say on this. Nancy says, I think doctors are so overwhelmed day-to-day treating patients that they don't have time right now to spend the time it would take to investigate some of these various treatments. On the upside, once things settle down, I'm sure we will find many better ways to treat these kind of things in the future. It will be interesting to see the new treatment protocols that will come out of the mess we're dealing with right now. I'm hoping one step further than that, Nancy, though. Yes, treatment protocols. But what about the prevention protocols? I think COVID-19 has put on the radar screen of, if you don't have your health in order, now is the time to get it in order. This is why America has been hit hard, because quite frankly, what COVID-19 has done is it has exposed the failure of our health system to make us healthy. They've never been about health. They've been about managing sick people and never getting to the root cause of why we have health problems to begin with, which is why I've been in business for 15 plus years trying to educate people. Nancy says, I think cancer research on how ketones and fasting affect cancer cell growth will also become more mainstream over the next decade. Yeah, it's out there even now. It's starting to be looked at, but even more so. I agree with you, Nancy, than ever before. All right. Thank you guys for watching over on Facebook. I'm going to pop over now to my YouTube channel. What's up, YouTube? See what you guys have to say about this one here today. Hello. So I hear that no low carbers that I know of have become seriously ill, if at all. Also haven't gotten sick since I went low carb. Is it the butter, says Philo Dice. Literally every ad for drug, shapewear, girdle, or operation, I think, why don't they just stop eating sugar, put the sugar down? Science is hot today. Okay, gotta run. So that was funny. Thank you, Philo Dice, for kind of drive-by commenting me today. That was good. Maria says, I love all this science. Well, it kind of makes my head hurt. Science was not my favorite subject in school, but when it comes to nutritional health science, I get kind of geeky with it as well. How much vitamin D do you take? I'm the same age as you, and I'm taking 4,000 IU. I'm going to shock you, because normally I take a higher dosage than a lot of people anyway. I, for some reason, have trouble keeping vitamin D in my body. So I take about 10,000 IU regularly before COVID came. Since COVID came, when it first came, it was still kind of wintertime. It wasn't quite warm enough to go outside in the sun yet. So I was taking about 35,000 IU a day. And since the sunshine has come back and I get purposeful sunshine on my skin throughout the day, I don't need to take as much, but I still probably take 20 to 25,000 IU of vitamin D3 gel caps a day. So still doing that. All right. Well, thank you, YouTube. And let's see if there's any final comments here. I see we're running out of time. Tiger says, gratifying to see researchers looking at the pettiness with respect to COVID-19. Is that what you meant to write? Gratifying to see researchers looking at the pettiness with pettiness. What did you mean to write if it wasn't pettiness? Joshua says, do you have K2 with vitamin D? Yeah. I use a vitamin K2 D3 supplement complex. So what did you mean besides pettiness? What did you mean, Tiger? Write what you meant, because I'm running out of time. Gratifying to see researchers looking at what with respect to COVID-19. Just write the word, just the one word. What did you mean to write? Now I'm curious. I'm trying to decipher. What did she mean? Okay. Looking at ketones is what she said. Okay. Whew. Not pettiness. That's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. Go and check it out, you guys. We're here Monday through Friday, right here on Instagram Live at Living Low Carb Man, LIVIN LOWCARBMAN. Simulcast on Facebook and YouTube. Watch it on replay, IGTV, or over on YouTube. You can also go to JimmyRants.com. Support the show if you like what I do here. I definitely want to keep it going, so click on that Patreon link at JimmyRants.com, and it would be greatly appreciated. All right, guys, that's all the time we have for now. We'll be back again real soon with more Jimmy Rants. See ya.